Trinity, Daughter of Wonder Woman, issue 1. Tom King writing with BELEN ORTEGA on the art. Yeah, this was an interesting one to go into because this is the backup team from Wonder Woman back in the early issues of Tom King's run. He was doing these backups with BELEN ORTEGA, and it was all the young Lizzie stuff where she was being babysat by by Damien and John. And this does some weird stuff with that, actually, where it kind of goes away from them in this issue, and focuses mainly on young Lizzie and teenage Lizzie and young adult Lizzie. Weirdly, where teenage Lizzie's time traveled back in time, and the knock-on effect of it is that it's turned Superman, Batman, Damien, John, and maybe one or two others into Corgis. So this issue is called Crisis on Infinite Corgis. And I love that Connor came back just in time to hear that.
What the hell am I doing here?
So Lizzie and her two older versions of herself they've went back in time to during Crisis on Infinite Earths, and a big part of the start of the issue is that she runs into Pariah, who's like monologuing about the endless screams of dying worlds and whatever Pariah goes on about. And she's like, hey, have you seen the super corgi that came through here? I'm trying to look for this dog. And he's like, what does it matter, child? Everything's ending. And he mentions his name, and she keeps calling him Mr. Piranha, which was getting a chuckle out of me. And it's especially fun at the end, because when he's trying to beg her to take him with her, he calls himself Piranha, and she corrects him and goes, it's Pariah, and leaves. So it's a funny book. There's still a lot of comedy here. I mean, at one point, the one page we do get of Damien and John before the main plot kicks off, when we cut to them, is we get like them arguing, and Damien is arguing that Batman would beat Superman in a fight, typical fanboy stuff. But he also criticizes John's existence, and John starts saying how, wait, no, I'm from the complicated merging of two realities. And he starts sort of defending his own continuity. It's a little on the nose, but it's amusing enough. So yeah, the plot of the issue is that there's time traveling Lizzies from the future, so we've got 3 ages of Lizzie, and it's kind of funny seeing young Lizzie look up to teenage Lizzie and go, oh, I'm kind of badass when I'm growing up. This is kind of great. And then you've got the slightly older, like young adult Lizzie looking down on both of them and being like very judgmental of how reckless they're being and so on. So there's some interesting stuff there. Ultimately, it's a fun read, but the concern I had going into this is that those backups were fun as short backups, but I wasn't sure how good they would feel as like full issues. And obviously this does some crazy plot ideas for sure. And there is a kind of an interesting cliffhanger, which maybe says we're going to do some interesting stuff, because Lizzie does bring up a couple of times throughout the issue that she doesn't know her father, and she kind of misses him despite never meeting him. She's a statue of him at one point in the future, when they see the others. She's also quite delighted, by the way, when everyone turns into a corgi at one point. So we get like Bat Corgi, Super Corgi, and then we get like Bat Puppy Corgi, Super Puppy Corgi. I'm going to assume the other Super Corgi is maybe Kara, or maybe another Superboy. It doesn't really matter. It's full of funny little bits. And the one main thing that it does that it sets up is that there's like a bit of a tease early on that someone's come to see the Fates. The 3 women who control the threads of existence or time or whatever their lore is. You're sure you know who they are more than I do, Connor. But it's Steve Trevor in the afterlife, or wherever we technically are for this stuff, saying that he needs to see his daughter, and he's tied them up. So it seems like this story, outside of the comedy stuff, is going to be about Lizzie getting a chance to meet Steve and like have some interaction with him because she's never met him. So I could see it being kind of touching in some ways, and I do think, given as the 3 different versions of Lizzie from different parts of her life, like having conflict is teaching us a lot about who she is. So she's feeling like quite a fully formed character. But I wouldn't rate it too highly either, just because it does feel like kind of a fun, silly side story as opposed to something that feels like, I mean, maybe that'll change. I mean, this ending with like this idea that she's going to in some way get to like talk to Steve, you know, somehow, like I do think that's potentially something that might have some weight to it, if and when we get to it. But the the story with the Corgis is funny, and her interacting with Pariah is often very funny, and the art there from Ortega, which, depending on your taste, you may not always like her art, but she's great with the facial expressions. And probably my favorite moment in the art is when she corrects Pariah when he actually calls himself Piranha, and the look on her face, like the kind of like almost like cartoon, like imagine Dexter from Dexter's Lab looking kind of like, I don't know what's the word I'm looking for, like really judgy at someone as she says pariah and throws it back in his face, is really funny, and the art makes it 5 times as funny as it would be if it was just a speech bubble saying pariah. The art sells the joke. So yeah, so it still remains to be seen how I'm going to feel about this as a mini series once it gets into the story a bit more deep. And maybe the one critique I would have other than that is maybe just that, it's a little on the wordy side at times. There's a lot of like talking between the various Lizzies and whatnot. I do think it's funny though. There's a nice interesting framing device where towards the end of the issue, because all the Corgis have escaped through portals into the multiverse and they have to go find them, there's a page later on that mirrors one of the opening scenes where Damien and John were fighting in front of Lizzie sitting on the couch. And they do that at the end, but with the 2 older versions of Lizzie fighting each other as young Lizzie is on the couch. But yeah, so the art's good. I think Ortega does a good job with the art. It maybe sings a bit more here, one because it's a full issue, but also because it's not being compared to Saint-Pierre, which always made it look worse than it was because it was after this phenomenal art for the main part of the issue. Here, it gets to sort of be on its own and sort of have its own strengths and weaknesses, and the weaknesses are few and far between. It's fair to say it's very detailed, and the character expressions are on point and actively make the book funnier. That said, I think I'm probably going to go with like a straight 7 for this as it stands. I'm just kind of waiting to see if it ever feels like it's beyond just a sort of funny, and a genuinely funny, but just a funny kind of side book that's maybe that doesn't feel as important yet. But depending on what they do with this whole getting to speak to her father thing, it could feel a bit more important down the line. So that's how I'm feeling about it just now.